Okay, I think we can get on to the next part. So that is the reading from the Concept and Reality book. I think someone is ready with the presentation. So maybe someone can start with where we have stopped. Then we'll further carry on from that point onwards.
Yeah, Bante, let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen, Bante?
Yes.
Okay, so we stopped in the page 51 in the first paragraph. So I'll read from one paragraph above, Bante, the average person.
Okay, yeah.
The average person, uninstructed in the Dhamma, with mere sensory perception to guide him, cognizes those 24 concepts as objects of thought. Having so cognized, he proceeds to imagine in terms of them in accordance with the flexional pattern and delights in those concepts. This is because he lacks clear comprehension. He is misled by naive sense experience and by his tendencies towards tanha, mana, ditti, papancha. Having evolved a concept, he proceeds to make it pliable and flexible. He resorts to inflection, which is an elementary feature in language. By establishing a correspondence between the grammar of language and the grammar of nature, he sets about weaving networks of papancha. The monk who is earnestly training himself on the path to Nibbana has refined and higher knowledge of those concepts in accordance with the Dhamma. He therefore endeavors to refrain from egoistic imaginings based on flexional patterns. Of him, it is said that he might gain comprehension by his training. The Arahant and the Tathagata, who have intuitively gained the higher knowledge, are not beguiled by the flexional or grammatical patterns of concepts, so as to indulge in egoistic imaginings. There's the full comprehension. Though the sutta makes no mention of the term papancha, Buddha Ghosha has rightly discerned its relevance to the sutta. Hence, he draws attention to it thus. Patavim patavito sanyatvati sotang patavim evang viparita sanyaya sanjanitva sanya nidanahi papancha sankati vachanato aprabhage tamapatethi tanha man ditti papanchahi ida manyana namena vuttehi manyati kappeti vikappeti nanappakarato anyata ganhati tena vuttang pataving manyatiti. Having cognized earth as earth, this means that he, the average person, having thus cognized earth in the form of a perverted sense impression, afterwards imagines, speculates, fabricates, mentally and in diverse ways grasps it wrongly with the gross papanchas of craving, conceit and whims, herein called manyana. As it has been said, sanna
nidanahi
papancha sanka. Buddha Ghosha explains each of the different forms of manyana given in the sutta with reference to one or more of the three papanchas. He is therefore somewhat puzzled at the concluding phrase patavim abhinandati, which he treats as repetition. Observing that the Theras of old Purana have not given any explanation for this repetition, he ventures to give his own. Patavim abhinandati vuttappakarameva patavim tanha dittahi abhinandati. Dittihi abhinanditi. Asadeti paramasati chati buttang hoti. Pataving manyatiti etaneva etasming atte siddhe kasma evam buttan titi che. Avicharitamethang Puranehi. Ayang pename attano mati.
Ayam paname attano mati.
Ayam paname attano mati. Desana vilasatova adinama dasanatova. He rejoices in earth. That is to say, that he rejoices in, cherishes and clings to earth with tanha, ditti, and the like as it has been already explained. When the phrase he imagines earth as such by itself conveys this sense, what is the justification for the above phrase? This point has not been commented upon by the Puranas. This is my personal opinion. The justification is that it reflects the Buddha's discursive style of preaching, or else emphasizes the evil effects of manjana. The concluding phrase appears as repetition because
I can't see that part. Okay, Hari. Okay, fine.
Is it okay,
Now
Bande?
go ahead. Yeah. So basically, I like to pay your attention on what we are discussing here. So when Nyananda is taking the Mulapariyaya Sutta to give a explanation how the Manjana or Papancha, that means the conceiving and conceptual proliferation, happens at different people. So in the Mulapariyaya Sutta, in the Majjhima Nikaya, so Buddha explains particularly 4 people. The first one is the general person who has no much understanding about the Dhamma or any sort of a practice. So he is simply the uninstructed worldling. So that is the Putujjana. The second person is the person who has gone through some practice and he has attained some understanding, and he has a certain amount of understanding about the Dhamma and some thorough understanding about the reality. So he is further training himself, and he is the Sekapuggala. And he is not yet an Arahant. The third person is the Arahant who has fully enlightened, who has fully comprehended the reality. And the fourth person is the Buddha, the Tathagata. Actually, the last two, the Buddha and the Arahant, so their way of looking at things are very similar. So therefore, we can shrink that to as one person. And altogether, there are 3 scenarios in that case. So as here it is mentioned, when the Putujjana sees something, say for example, he is seeing a car. So immediately he may recognize it as a car. So that is what he knows. Probably he may recognize it as my car is old, this is the best car, or I have to change the car, so I have to buy a new car. So he starts thinking, and it's his car, and he has a certain amount of belonging, and maybe he's proud of it, or he's ashamed of having that car, or whatever the way. So he's relating to the experience, so what he has seen. So this is how he starts conceiving, he starts proliferating, and he starts thinking basically. So that is one scenario. And with respect to the Sekapuggala, the trainee, assume that he too is seeing a car. He too can recognize it as a car, but at the same time he has some thorough understanding about the materiality. So he has seen through his Kayanupassana, maybe Dhatu Manasikara. So what is materiality and how impermanent they are, and how all what we so-called objects are being created by amalgamating or by combining various matter, various elements, and then we have given a name just to identify from other objects. But inherently what they have is merely 4 elements. So he has thoroughly understood it, thoroughly experienced it, and while his practice is continuing, probably he has completely disintegrated the whole physical matter, and he has understood, okay, even though people have given various names and certain preferences or values, ultimately there is nothing substantial. Although we call them as a car or vehicle or a bus or train, whatever, they are merely names. What they really have is nothing but the four elements. So this kind of an understanding is there operating in him according to the Dhamma as a result of his practice. But there's a possibility that he too tempt to conceive, because it's still the fair amount of defilements are operating. So because of the past habit, he too probably tempt to conceive. He too probably tempt to proliferate. But he is restraining himself. That's why the term pataving mamanyi, patavito mamanyi. So the mamanyi. So don't proliferate. So he is restraining himself. He's advising himself. He's warning himself. Don't do it again. Don't proliferate. Don't conceive. So likewise, he is again and again restraining himself, minimizing the proliferation, reducing the proliferation, avoiding the proliferation. So any kind of obsessive thinking he is cutting off. Further and further he is continuing. So that is the training. And then with respect to the Buddha and the Arahant, so they have completed the training and they have the thorough understanding about the reality. So as a result of that, when assume that they see a vehicle, there is no manjana at all, there is no conceiving at all, there is no any egocentric thinking at all, because the ego completely penetrated, and what is the objectifying various outside experiences, that is also penetrated, even though they can conventionally recognize it as a car, but still with respect to that car, there is no conceiving inside their minds. There is no proliferation inside their minds. So that is the very interesting part. So the Arahants and the Buddha are completely free from any papancha. Nippapancha tathagata. So the Tathagatas are completely free from proliferation, free from conceiving. So that is the important part here. So Venerable Nyananda explaining these differences available among these different individuals, and so that indicates our practice also has to lead towards that direction. Probably you can remember before we start our practice, we may spend hours in thinking, proliferating, and imagining, fantasizing, daydreaming, all that may have happened. But now at least it has to reduce to some extent as a result of the practice. And you should have a kind of a direction. Okay, as much as possible, I am keeping my mind free from proliferation. So proliferation is a dart. Proliferation is a disease. Proliferation is a kind of a bile. So this kind of a thinking, so seeing the proliferation or conceiving as a disease, help us to incline towards non-proliferation. Nippapancha. Nippapancha pade ratu. So often Buddha advise, okay, you have to incline towards non-proliferation. Keeping the mind silent when it is necessary. Keeping the mind quiet when it is necessary. To be free from inner chatter. So this is something that we need to understand and give some emphasis during our practice. And maybe someone you can further continue. And that actually Venerable Buddha also confirms that in this passage, what Buddha has meant is related to the proliferation of papancha. And that's what further Venerable Nyananda also confirms.
Yeah, the concluding phrase appears as a repetition because Buddha Ghosha himself has explained the preceding forms of manjana from the standpoint of tanha, mana, and ditti papancha. But when we regard those four forms of manjana as an illustration of the wordling's commitment to the grammatical structure, as we have indicated above, the problem of repetition or redundancy will not arise. On the contrary, the sutta would thereby gain in depth and significance. The aim of the Buddha in preaching this sutta is to point out the elementary modes in which all phenomena present themselves to the mind of the four individual types. Sabbha Dhamma Mula Pariyayam. The grammatical structure of the language is the most elementary mode of presentation. It is here that the concepts are invested with the necessary flexibility and set on their tracks to proliferate as tanha, mana, and ditti papancha. The uninstructed average person succumbs to it. The disciple training on the Aryan path resists it, and the emancipated one transcends it. The commentary tells us that the immediate purpose for which the Buddha preached this sutta was to dispel the conceit of 500 monks who were proud of their theoretical knowledge, pariyatti, of the Dhamma. It also says that their conceit was due largely to the fact that they were formerly Brahmins, well versed in the three Vedas. Although the sutta is not explicit as to the authenticity of this tradition, it is probably true, for the sutta ends with this unusual sentence: idamavocha bhagava nate bhikkhu bhagavato bhasitang abhinandunti.
Yes, sir. Idamavocha bhagava nate bhikkhu bhagavato bhasitang abhinandunti.
Thus spoke the Buddha, and those monks did not rejoice at his words. In view of the fact that we hardly find any other sutta of this proportion which was not rejoiced over by the monks to whom it was specifically addressed, the commentarial tradition may be granted. As we have shown above, the sutta in fact exposes the nature of the totality of concepts and their syntactical relations. The concepts, be they material or spiritual, worldly or transcendental, are not worthy of being grasped dogmatically. They are not to be treated as ultimate categories and are not to be discarded in the course of the spiritual endeavor. If this is the true significance of the sutta, then there is no wonder that those conceited monks were crestfallen on hearing it. The commentary, however, tells us that they were displeased because they did not understand this abstruse discourse. On contrary, we might say that they were displeased because they did understand the discourse. Hence, it is not the abstruseness of the discourse that dispelled their conceit, that as the commentary asserts, but it is the very dialectical insinuations underlying underlying it that humbled them. It is no doubt disquieting revelation to most of us, and the immediate reaction cannot be happy one. Even Buddhaghosa seems to have been rather reluctant to appreciate fully the implications of the sutta, and we have a curious hint as to this in his comment on the word Nibbana, occurring as the last in the list of 24 concepts. While commenting, he hastens to add that Nibbana here refers only to the 5 hetrical concepts of Nibbana. This narrowing down of the meaning is obviously incongruous with the spirit of the sutta. It, however, reflects a desperate attempt on the part of the commentarial tradition to salvage the orthodox concept of Nibbana, so dear to our religious consciousness, that the emancipated sage, Muni, no longer clings even to such concepts as Nibbana or detachment, Virago, is clearly indicated in the following verse of the Sutta Nipata.
Okay, one moment. So basically, as you probably can remember, in the structure of this sutta, there are Buddha taking 24 concepts. And those concepts are taken from various cross-sections of the experience. Say Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu. So those are the material aspects that Buddha has included. And then the different material jhanic experiences, that also included. And some arupa jhanic experiences, that also included. And various Brahmanic beliefs, like Pajapati and all, that also included. And then the experiences, like Ditta, Sutta, Mutta, Viññāta, that also included. And interestingly, Nibbana also included. So altogether, there are 24 example concepts that Buddha is considering, and taking one by one, he's explaining what is the understanding about it, what is the perception about it by a ignorant person, by a prani, the seeker, and how it is being comprehended by an arahant or the Buddha. Say, for example, taking the Patavi, as we just did. So taking the Patavi, the earth element, or any earthy type of object. So how a worldling would experience, how the worldling would perceive it, and how a Sekapuggala, a trainee, would perceive it, and how the Arahant would perceive it. Similarly, say, with respect to the something seeing, Ditta. So how the worldling would perceive it, how he may react, how he may perceive, or even conceive or proliferate, and how the trainee would practice, and how the Arahant or the Buddha would practice. And similarly, with respect to Nibbana, how the worldling would think about the Nibbana, how a trainee would comprehend the Nibbana, and how the Arahant would experience the Nibbana. So likewise, all that is included from different cross-sections of our experiences. And interesting sutta. It's a very, very interesting sutta, keeping at the very first sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. An interesting point, as Venerable Jnanananda highlights here, even though it is very, very important sutta, after hearing this, monks were not happy. So typically, all the other suttas, whenever Buddha preached, it is mentioned, Bhagavato Bhasitang Abhinandunti. So whatever the Buddha has mentioned, they appreciated, they were quite happy about his teaching. So that was the response from the monks, from the audience. But interestingly, this sutta, after hearing that, so the monks were not happy about it. So one argument here, as Venerable Buddha was pointing out, is because they are actually the Brahmanic type of monks. They were Brahmins before they became monks. And after becoming monks also, they were so concerned about the teaching and learning. So they are extremely educated. So as a result of that, they were conceited. And when Buddha preached this sutta, they were not happy because of their conceit. That Buddha wants to very much like attack them, or we can't use the term attack, maybe to teach them, warn them about their conceit. So as a result of that, they were not happy. That's one way of interpreting it. But on the other hand, as Venerable Jnanananda points out, so they understood it thoroughly. So that's why they were not happy, because they understood that they made a mistake by giving so much value to concepts, but they are merely concepts. And as a result of that, they may be ashamed of what they were doing, and they may understood their mistake. So probably that is why they were a little puzzled or not happy about the preaching, because they thoroughly understood it. So that's another way of interpreting it. So anyway, this sutta is very, very important lesson to all of us, particularly as who are practitioners, who are meditators, how we are corresponding to various experiences, various concepts. Say, for example, when you see a sight, assume it's a very, very beautiful sight. Suppose you are experiencing some kind of a piece of news, and how you are reacting to it. So I heard that someone was released from a kind of a legal issue, and maybe the Australians may be happy about it. So how are you reacting to it? How are you interpreting it? Are you thinking about it? Are you happy about it? Are you proliferating about it? Or are you able to keeping your mind quiet? So likewise, various incidents happening in our society, various experiences that we go through, all in a way give us some sort of a indication or triggering to think, to proliferate, to conceive. But how are we managing it currently as a result of our practice? So this is something that we can check about ourselves. So the important thing about the trainee is that he is capable of calming him down, basically abandoning the papancha, not allowing it to overpower him or to overwhelm him. So he is capable of keeping it aside. So there's an interesting sutta called Kosambya Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. So there Buddha explains 7 contemplations, certain excellent qualities which are available to a Sotapanna, the one who has attained the fruit of Sotapanna, stream winner. So one interesting capacity he has is that he can abandon any kind of obsessive thought quickly. So in the other hand, we can say there are no obsessions in his mind. So pariyutthana kilesa, there is nothing that he can't abandon. Now say for example, someone might go through a tragic situation, and as a result of that, he tend to think about it. Again and again think about it. And ultimately it can become an obsession. Now he can't stop thinking about it. And assume that you are angry about someone. It may start with a slight anger, little resistance, but later if you start thinking, pondering about it, feeding about it, it may grow to such an extent, now you can't stop thinking about it. It has overwhelmed you. It has become a very strong anger. Now you can't stop it like that. Maybe you have to react, maybe you have to blame, hit the person, etc., etc. So we start reacting because we can't bear it anymore. But the interesting part of the Sekapungala is there is no such unabandoned sensual desire which is obsessing to his mind, has become an obsession to his mind. Or any kind of anger which is unabandoned in his mind. And similarly, Sottantopa, maybe any kind of a restlessness, any kind of regrets, any kind of doubts, perplexities, none of those hindrances are there in his mind, which he is unable to abandon. So they might come again and again, but he can quickly abandon it. So that's a very interesting feature that Buddha is pointing out with respect to a stream winner in this Kosambya Sutta. So he knows when they are there, but he can't become a completely victimized to such obsession for a long time. Quickly he can notice it. So once it is noticed, he can abandon it. So this is a very interesting part as a reflection that Buddha is explaining in this Kosambya Sutta with respect to proliferation or with respect to obsessions. So I think probably we can go a little bit further and we can spend a few more minutes, Saman.
Yeah, Bante. Simatigo Brahmano Tassanati Nyatwava Disvava Samugahitam Naraga Ragi Naviraga
Na raga ragi, na viraga ratto.
Na viraga ratto tassida natti paramuggahita.
Parang uggahitang.
Paramuggahita.
Yeah.
But for the Brahmin, the Muni, who has transcended all bounds, here is nothing that is grasped by knowing or by seeing. He is neither attached to attachment, nor he is attached to detachment. In this world, he has grasped nothing as the highest. The Mulapariyaya Sutta does not stand alone when it stresses the value of developing a detached attitude to all concepts, so that one can disown them without regrets when the occasion demands it. It was the burden of Alagadupama Sutta, which we have discussed above. It is also the moral of the rings through the phrase Sabbe Dhamma Nalam
Abhinivesaya.
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 Abhinivesaya. To render it simply, nothing is worth clinging to. The theme comes up again in the following verse of Dhammapada. Sabbe Dhamma anattati yada panyaya passati. Ata nibbindati dukke.
Atha nibbindati.
Ata nibbindati dukke. Esa maggo visuddhya. When one sees with insight that everything is not self, then one finds no relish in all that is ill. This is the path to purity. Thus we arrive at the uncompromising position that as a concept Nibbana is no more real or absolute than other concepts. It merely symbolizes conceptually the transcendental experience in negative terms. All definitions of Nibbana have validity only from the wordling's point of view and take the form of negative of various aspects of worldly existence.
Wordling's point of view and take the form of negations. Take the form of negations.
Yes, take the form of negations of various aspects of worldly existence, either explicitly or implicitly. Now, if the most predominant and pervasive characteristic of the world is prolific conceptualization, it follows that the transcendental experience of Nibbana could be defined as the non-prolific Nippapancha, or the cessation, the appeasement of conceptual proliferation, Prapancha Nirodha, Prapancha Vupasama. Hence, it is that very often in those suttas which refer to the consciousness of the Arahants, we are baffled by a string of negations in some form or other. The consciousness of the Arahant is said to be so ineffable that even the gods and Brahmas are incapable of discovering its basics or support. He has the ability to attain to a unique samadhi in which he has no recourse to any of the data of sense experience normally considered essential for jhana or samadhi.
Okay, so we'll stop here, Saman. So this is a very interesting point that Venerable Jnananda is going to explain. So we'll take it to the next week. So basically the idea is, even here we talk Nibbana. So it's a kind of experience that we have to sort of think, and still maybe the worldling may haven't experienced it. So we are thinking about it, we are conceptualizing about it, and we wish for Nibbana. So this is how we start practicing. Nibbanam Paraman Sukham. So we being motivated, inspired to attain Nibbana. So interestingly, as we are continuing further and further, so our aim might vary. So our aim also evolve. So what is Nibbana? So how we imagine about the Nibbana, how we conceptualize about the Nibbana. So that also may vary as we are maturing in Dhamma. So therefore, how a worldling would conceptualize about Nibbana and how the trainee would continue towards Nibbana might be different, because here the trainee might have some experience, some realization about the Nibbanic experience in his mind. Now it has become some real experience for him rather than a mere concept. So therefore he is no more probably conceptualizing, rather he is just trying to experience it. So probably you can remember with respect to the third noble truth, Dukkha Nirodhang Arya Satchang Satchikatabbang. So Buddha explains that the Dukkha Nirodha Arya Satcha, so that is the Nibbana, the cessation of suffering, has to be fully realized. It is something to be realized. It is not something to be conceptualized. It is not something to be imagined. Rather, it has to be realized. So that's a very interesting points that we can think about it, ponder about it, and maybe further we'll look into it. in the coming chapters how Venerable Nyananda going to explain it. So with that, I like to conclude today's concept and reality book reading and discussion, and I like to open the session for questions.
Bhante, we have received 4 questions today.
Right.
Seek your permission to read the questions to you, Bhante.
Yeah.
The first question out of 4, it's regarding the practice. Dear Bhante, my sitting practice is mindfulness on breathing. I focus on the in-breath and out-breath with noting in and out during the start. After continuous attention for about 10 minutes, the noting drops off and the breath becomes subtle. I can establish mindfulness for up to 30 minutes without much distraction. Afterwards, my posture discomfort starts and the body starts to lean forward and backwards. I can observe that I do not like this discomfort and want to find a new posture to settle. I have the option of try to endure the discomfort and observe it mindfully, or adjust to the new posture and observe my liking and attachment to it. Much merit for Bhante's advice on this, on which path I should choose and how should I observe these phenomena with metta. That's the end of the first question, Bhante.
Yeah, I think, so basically if you can understand, say after half an hour, there's a little pain, and but you desire to be free from pain and to continue your practice. So in that sense, you are somewhat looking at your mind. So that's a good sign, basically. So we are concerned about the bodily phenomena, bodily comfort, and in the opposite, we have certain pain. And now there's a little resistance towards the pain and expecting some comfort. So if you can recognize this mentality, so how the mind is rejecting the pain and aspiring towards the comfort, so that's a little observation that we can do to our mind and recognizing. So we are very much like seeking certain comfort every time, and we change the posture in order to seek comfort. So whenever there is little discomfort, so we change the posture. It even happens naturally. So more and more we are, in a way, investigating our behavior. More and more we are investigating our behavior of the mind. So therefore, I mean, what you're doing is correct. So basically continue the practice, and whenever this sort of discomfort happen, if you are able to recognize the kind of reaction happening in the mind, how mind prefers the comfort and how it wants to continue and desire to continue the practice, but again the pain is acting against it. So how the mind is going through some sort of a dilemma. So if you can recognize that, so that is something that you are kind of a little insight that you are gaining about the behavior of your mind.
Yeah, Bhante. The question number 2 of 4, it's a general question. Dear Venerable Sir, what is Yogananda Bhavana? Is this our practice in retreats and this program? Otherwise, is our mindfulness practice pure insight meditation with metta? That's the end of the question, Bhante.
Yeah, let me explain all 4 types of meditations briefly. So there's the first one called Samatha Pubbangama Vipassana. So one practices pure Samatha, pure tranquility type of meditation, and later turns into the Vipassana practice. So that is one approach. The second one is one practices Vipassana first, maybe based on the maybe noting and as much as possible trying to use the Yoniso Manasikara to penetrate the objects and trying that to the best of one's ability and trying to develop Vipassana first. And after some achievement, he's trying to turn towards the Samatha. That's the second approach. So the Yogananda is very much like keeping these 2 sides together. So you are trying to keep them parallel. So you are practicing Samatha, you are practicing Vipassana. very much like keeping them in parallel. And the last one is called Dhamma Uddacha Viggahita Manasa. So when the mind become somewhat distracted as a result of too much thinking about the Dhamma, maybe too much overflowing of the Dhamma, now he may be trying to calm down his mind and keep the mind silent. So this sort of a practice. Now in the Yogananda case, actually, we can't say it is practicing both together in the sense concurrently, but maybe assume that in one session you are practicing samatha and another session you are practicing vipassana. Likewise, you are always trying to keep both at the same time. So if you consider the mindfulness practice, so I feel at the beginning we can't say we are practicing vipassana. It's very much like we are trying to establish mindfulness. So that is how Buddha explains the satipatthana merely refers to the establishment of mindfulness. That is the first stage. Because our mind is restless and shifting to here and there and very subject to various distractions. Now, as a result of that, you need to first tame the mind. You need to establish the mind. So that establishment is fairly closer to some other practice. So mind get distracted, again you keep it back on the selected object. Again mind get distracted, again you bring it back to the selected object. It's a kind of a restraint that we are doing to the mind, so that ultimately the mind remains calm, quiet, and fairly collected. To some extent, we have achieved the samatha. We have achieved the tranquility. Then, before getting to the jhana, so you may start vipassana, using your yoniso manasikara to investigate various phenomena. Now we can move towards the vipassana. So this is how typically we practice. And to some extent, we can say it is samatha pubbangama vipassana. But on the other hand, it is not, we are going to deep levels of samatha. Rather, we take it to the fair amount, which is enough for us to practice vipassana. And maybe even later, as you practice vipassana, probably you may achieve a amount of understanding as a result of the freedom of mind. From there onwards, it appears like samatha. Because so it's a kind of a combination. So you can't have a direct line or borderline telling, okay, this is samatha, this is vipassana. So now yogi is very much like keeping them fairly together. So keeping the clarity of the mind, which is, we can say, the tranquility, but at the same time looking any kind of glitches, any kind of defilements available in the mind. So that is vipassana. So these are very much like properly blend together. And that is how further when someone is practicing.
Question number 3 of 4. This is regarding a practice. Dear Bhante, if time permits, can you please explain how one can develop metta meditation in the backdrop of mindfulness practice? Recently, when I wanted to relax and soften the practice a bit, I tried metta meditation and it was rejuvenating. Thus, my request. Much merit for your service. That's the end of this, the question, Bhante.
Yeah. So basically, as you know, that the metta uses very simple phrases, but those are quite effective, heartfelt phrases. So like, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. So likewise, you wish to the others, may he be well, may he be happy, may he be free from suffering. To all the beings, you may practice like, may all the beings be well, may all the beings be happy, may all the beings be free from suffering. So likewise, this is a little phrase that you are using to again and again bring your attention back to yourself and back to others. So in one sense, we can say it is tranquilizing the mind. It's a kind of samatha practice. But at the same time, as you said, it may fairly inspire the mind. Very much like joy, arouse the joy in the mind. And if you are doing it effectively, wholeheartedly, and honestly wishing happiness towards you and to the others. So it's a very beautiful practice, really beautiful and really encouraging practice. And basically, Buddha, in certain suttas, actually, he has used parallel with Vipassana. Now, there is a sutta called Metta Sahagata Sutta. In that, Buddha mentioned that Sati Sambojjhangam Bhaveti Metta Sahagatena Sati Sambojjhangam Bhaveti. Vivekanistham, Viraganistham, Nirodhanistham, Vassanta Parinami. Metta Sahagatena Dhammavichaya Sambojjhangam Bhaveti. Vivekanistham, Viraganistham, Nirodhanistham, Vassanta Parinami. So likewise, so even at the level of the development of enlightenment factors, Buddha say you can blend the metta-like quality into your mind. So as you said, sometimes our practice become dry and you need certain amount of lubricant to continue. So metta would be a very interesting lubricant. So you practice little metta and very much like lubricating your heart, have now certain amount of joy, have some outflow of metta towards the others. And now you start practicing further. Maybe if you want, maybe vipassana, or while your metta quality is in the mind, you are now trying to keep the mind free from any kind of an attachment. So moving towards the vipassana. So likewise, you can have a blend of metta even with vipassana. So therefore, I mean, what you have tried is not a bad thing. Buddha also has recommended it. And there are certain suttas like where he talks about Panidahaya Bhavana and Apanidahaya Bhavana. So Panidahaya Bhavana is actually the Samatha meditation, like Metta. Apanidahaya Bhavana is the Vipassana, the Satipatthana, where you are trying to be free from any desires. So time to time having the mind balanced like this is quite okay. Yeah, back to you, Saman.
Yeah, Bhante. This is the last question for today, Bhante. There are other written questions. It's regarding Dhamma sermon. Dear Bhante, in order to see things at least as sekha and to restrain, should we remind and visualize impermanence when we see something compact? Example, the example of the car. Or does it come naturally with the practice? That's the end of the question, Bhante.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So, I mean, even without practice, you can actually know, okay, car is merely a concept. It's a combination of various parts. So as a result of that, I don't need to attach to it. I don't need to conceptualize it. So you can, in the way, try to educate your mind. So that is one possibility. But on the other hand, when you practice Dhatu Manasikara, that actually helps you to dissolve the whole thing. Say you are keeping your attention to your body, so it may start disintegrating. Previously, it has the compactness, as you said. It's a compact body. But as a result of the practice, it starts disintegrating, falling into pieces. Now you can't have some sort of a perception about the compactness. What you have is a kind of elements. So what you have experienced with respect to your body is common to the outside as well. So elements are merely elements, either they are inside or outside. So now you are inferentially understanding, okay, what is outside, all the matter, what we see outside, also elements. But still, as you said, which may not be very powerful, again and again you may get carried away by the compactness. When you see a beautiful car, again you may start liking it, you want to own it, you want to have it, you want to go for a ride. So likewise, so things can happen. But as you said, thought, so the previous insight that we had can be taken as a weapon to overcome that conceptualizing. So we have some experience, we have some direct knowledge about the matter, maybe using our body. So now we are trying to apply that same realization to cut off the proliferation. to educate the mind, to enlighten the mind, to untangle the mind, so that it may not continue to proliferate. So therefore, I feel as you are continuing that, slowly, so mind starts behaving well, on a way, and it doesn't want to proliferate now. It may happen gradually, but at the beginning it may want to proliferate, but now you are restraining because you are continuing your practice. But later, now mind finds its own solace, its mind finds its own seclusion. Even though he see a car, now it doesn't want to get involved. So likewise, it's a gradual practice. And as you continue, so it becomes a more natural state of the mind, not that you are influentially trying to restrain the mind. Yeah, back to you, Saman.
Yeah, Bhante, we just received another question. Again, it's a general question, Bhante. Dear Bhante, to get into first jhana, does one have to establish a nimitta first? Also, why does Buddha not mention nimitta in the suttas? Or does Buddha make reference to nimittas with metta? That's the end of the question, Bhante.
Yeah, this is a good question. So some actually teachers argue that so Buddha did mention the nimitta, but it is not extremely deep. Rather, you can have this jhanic experience at a shallow level. So you don't need a nimitta. But on the other hand, in certain schools, they believe, okay, it is a must to have a nimitta. Without it, you can't get on to absorption. So it is something essential. So these are different arguable points. It's very difficult to understand whether which one is the exactly correct and which one is exactly what Buddha has preached. So therefore, understanding the depth of the jhana is another aspect. So one can attain jhana at a shallow level, and another one can attain jhana at a deeper level, at a very deeply absorbed level. Interesting thing is that all jhanic factors may be present. If it is the first jhana, all 5 jhana factors are present. At one occasion, it is more shallow level. At another occasion, it may be a more deeper level, more in-depth level. So, but the next question is, are we really in need of extremely deep jhana? Are we in need of a very extremely deep absorption? So that can become a sort of an addiction even. So you want to escape from the whole world. You want to cut off from the whole world. So you're deeply absorbed using jhana. So you are in a completely different world. It's a kind of an escape. And that also may be blissful, possible. But on the other hand, from the vipassana point of view, so you are deeply absorbed. Your mind is, consciousness is extremely established. So we can't say it is beneficial to the vipassana on the other hand. But if you are experiencing at a shallow level, you may be a little vulnerable because there is no much protection coming from the deep samadhi. But you are at a shallow level, but there may be a possibility of arising various obstacles, hindrances. But then and there you can do vipassana. You can practice vipassana. You can see the defilements, you can see the hindrances. So as a result of that, you can practice vipassana. So you are in a way cutting off the defilements. You are in a way weakening the defilements. So a certain amount of fading away of defilements are happening. So at one age, you may be keeping your mind at a shallow level, but still free from any defilements. So you may experience more sublime kind of experience rather than going to an absorption and deeply absorbed to something and keeping yourself free from any defilements. Now, as a result of the vipassana practice, you amalgamated with the samatha. Now you may be experiencing more subtle, more gentle, more sublime kind of experience, but at a shallow level, because the hindrances are not popping up or attacking, defilements are not attacking, those are already you have handled. So therefore, I feel that such kind of an approach is much beneficial from the Vipassana point of view. I feel that may be the reason that like the Sayados and certain Achans, like Ajahn Buddhadasa, for example. So Ajahn Buddhadasa particularly mentioned, okay, you should not go too deep, rather you keep your mind shallow, but very mindful, allowing to see things properly, maintaining the awareness very well, seeing how things are coming and going, so that you are fully aware of what's really going on. You are not completely deprived from your experience, rather you are keeping the awareness very well. So I feel that is much more relevant to the Buddha's teaching. Like, say, for example, if you read the Mahasunyata Sutta, so there Buddha highlights Sampajanakari Hoti. He again and again emphasizes the value of the awareness, value of the knowledge, or value of the knowing part. But deep absorption can take you to a less knowledgeable but more deep concentration level. So therefore, I feel giving some emphasis to the knowledge, giving some emphasis to the awareness is much important than the thinking of the depth. So therefore, nimittas on that respect, I would say, if you have it, you can use it. You can see whether you can achieve jhana using it. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. Continue what you can. And in that sense, so it is not become a kind of a issue for you anymore. Okay, back to you, Saman.
Yeah, that's the end of all the written questions, Bhante. We've got about 2 minutes left. Shall we end the program, or shall we open for any other questions if they got online?
So, do you have any questions?
If you've got any questions, you've got about 2 minutes. You can raise your hand. Looks like there are no questions, Bhante. So let's formally end this program. To formally end this program, first let us pass our merits and thank Venerable Bhante for sharing his valuable time with us, even with a very busy schedule with the monastery. And then to all the supporters of this program who are both seen as well as unseen. Finally, to all the participants for joining us today with their practice and then sharing their questions with us. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yeah, Thero Sannai.